Hey everybody! In the last video, we talked about some important lines you should know in the Ponziani, and why you should play the Vukovic Gambit, and why the Vukovic Gambit is the best line to play against the Ponziani. So if you have not seen that video, make sure to check out that video. I'll put like a cue card up or whatever, the little info thing. And today we're gonna be going over, excuse me, some of the actual Vukovic Gambit lines, ways that white can decline the gambit, and ways that what happens when white accepts a gambit. It's really fun for black. So let's just get into it. All right, if I can get to the right tab. So here we have our position: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, c3, the Ponziani. And if we go a couple moves further, knight f6, d4, knight cross e4, d5, and the characterizing move of the Vukovic Gambit, bishop c5. First, we're going to go over how white can decline this gambit. So if you're looking at this position from white, you're like, okay, I can take this free knight, but there's going to be some problems on f2. So, some players, they might get scared. They might think, like, I'd rather just protect f2 and just play a middle game. And there's really only one way you can do this, and that's bishop e3. But this is actually a huge blunder. And it's actually kind of weird because bishop e3, this blunder bishop e3, is actually more common in slower time controls, which it might be the opposite of what you'd expect. You might think like longer time controls, your opponent will blunder less, but no, actually, your opponent is more likely to play bishop e3 in longer time controls. I don't have the numbers up, but it's like 20% in blitz and 40% in rapid and 50% in classical. White plays bishop e3 in this position in the lead chess database. So that might be something you might want to keep in mind if you're prepping for like a classical tournament. Your opponent might be more likely to play bishop e3. Then the other move, which is this d captures c6, which we're going to be going over later this video. But for now, we're going to go over bishop e3. So bishop e3. Here you simply just want to take. Bishop takes e3, f takes e3, and it's always good when you can remove this f pawn from in front of your opponent's king and weaken this diagonal right here. But now our knight's attack, so we better move our knight. We're going to move our knight to e7. And now this is actually very similar to one of the positions we looked at in the last video, except, the dark squared bishops are gone and there's a pawn on e6 instead of e3 instead of f2. So it's a very similar position, and it also has a lot of the same traps from that position. So for example, after knight cross e5, it's really important that you don't play d6 here because there are some of the same traps. Like here, if you play d6, well, there's queen a4 check, and it just picks up the knight. And there's tricks with the bishop too in some lines, so you really want to be wary of this d6 move. But here, in this position, there have been 3 moves tried by white. So first, I'm going to consider knight cross e5 the main line, since that's the most popular move by far. But I do want to go over some of these other moves that white can play here. So first, white can play bishop d3. And sometimes this line actually transpositions into the main line. But here you want to play knight f6. And now there's no reason why white shouldn't take this pawn, so knight cross e5. Here you still don't want to play d6 because even though this queen a4 check fork is no longer there, black will still have to concede something with either c6 or king f8, and it's not going to be good. So d6 is still not advised here. You should simply play knight e cross d5 And now we're threatening knight cross e3 and queen e7, and this is just a very pleasant position for black, and white has this isolated e-pawn that will be a long-term target, so this is a good position for black. The second sideline move that white can play is bishop e2, and once again you don't want to play d6, so we're going to castle. That way we can play d6 because it's a very useful move. It supports e5, it unleashes our bishop. But now white should play knight cross e5, and here you simply can play knight f5, unleashing your queen on this tender h4 square and attacking this e3 pawn. And this is also a very pleasant position for black. Black is actually winning here. Alright, now that we've looked at those two sidelines, let's look at the main move, the immediate knight cross e5. Once again, you don't want to play d6. You should simply castle here. You pretty much always, before playing d6, you want to make sure you're castled first. And this just eliminates any queen a4 check or bishop b5 check ideas. So here, over 100 games have been played, and in almost all of them, the move bishop d3 has been played in this position. And it's just because this is the most natural move ever. It develops a bishop, it aims a bishop towards black's king, it gains a tempo on the knight, and it prepares to castle. And while this move is not a blunder itself, it allows black to play the very tricky move, not moving the knight, and obviously you can't defend this knight, but here black can actually play knight cross d5. And you can't actually take this knight, which might be very tempting. You might think you might just think, oh, it's a fair trade. I take the knight, and then there's a queen check on h4, and I lose back my bishop, and it's a fair trade. But the resulting position for black is going to be very pleasant. So here, if black is already up a pawn, has a much safer king, better development, so this is already a great position for black. But if white does decide to take this knight, which they have in over 80% of the games in the Lichess database, they will be completely lost after bishop cross e4, queen h4 check, king e2, such an ugly move, and then queen cross e4 check, and you're just threatening too many things. You're threatening to take this knight, take this pawn, and take this pawn with a potential fork on the king and the rook. So this is a wonderful position for black. And those are all the lines I have in the declined version of the gambit, starting with bishop e3. Now we're going to take a look at the accepted version of the gambit. And oops, you guys saw a little sneak peek there, but we're going to get to that eventually. So we have our position. Let me just skip ahead here. After bishop c5, we already looked at bishop e3. The other move is d cross c6. This is the best move and also the most common move by white. So here it looks like black might have two moves. However, knight cross f2 is actually a huge mistake. So I just want to clear this up really quickly. It might seem like a strong fork, but it fails to the very natural queen d5. And black will enter a very sharp position where they have to fight hard to simply maintain equality here. So you can explore this line with the engine if you want, or you could just take my word for it and say that believe that bishop cross f2 check is much stronger than the knight fork here. So bishop cross f2, white only has one move, king e2, and here we simply want to bring our bishop back to b6. And here, so yeah, here black is threatening knight f2, and 4 main moves have been tried, but only one of them is good. So let's start with the worst move, queen a4. So this does nothing to stop black's threat, which is knight f2, so we'll continue that. White has to save their rook, so white plays rook g1, and now we could simply play d cross c6. And this position is already very pleasant for black. However, if white continues with the most commonly played move, bishop e3, attempting to interfere with this bishop's defense in the knight, they will be checkmated very shortly after queen d3 check, king cross f2, queen captures e3 check, king g3, and queen f2, the forward queen move, attacking the king from behind, and this sneaky bishop on c8, delivering checkmate. So that is the worst out of the 4 moves. The second worst is bishop e3. So here we're simply going to play b cross c6, and this is actually going to be one of the only lines where we actually take this pawn. In a lot of the other lines, we are not going to take this pawn because it's simply not worth our time, and we want to be attacking instead of wasting our time capturing silly little pawns. But here it's actually useful because it allows our bishop to develop to this diagonal. So, or at least it's a threat. So here white will likely play bishop cross b6. That's one of the reasons they develop their bishop to e3, and also black is attacking, so white wants to trade pieces. Black should play a cross b6, opening up the rook. Here knight bd2 has been played, and we simply can retreat our knight to f6. Here black has already regained 3 pawns for the piece. They will have a safer king and wonderfully placed pieces. Meanwhile, white's king is going to be very weak in the center, and their piece development is stunted. So this is, black already has more than enough compensation for the piece in this line. And this is just very nice to play. So that is bishop e3. Let's look at the third move, which is c cross d7 check. And this is a mistake because simply after bishop cross d7, this position is already wonderful for black. Black is threatening bishop b5 check, which will lead to checkmate. And I've prepared an example line simply following some engine moves and some common moves from the database. Bishop e3, bishop b5 check, king e1, queen cross d1 check, king cross d1, bishop cross f1, rook cross f1, bishop cross e3, rook e1, knight f2 check, king c2, bishop h6, rook cross e5 check, and king d7, and black enters the endgame up a clear pawn, and he's going to be ready to bring these rooks to the center. And I will also add that this is not even the best line from black, but it is the simplest line, which gains simplest and most forcing line, which gains a clear advantage. So obviously this is good for black. So those are the 3 not good moves after bishop b6. So you can already see if white is not prepared for this line, they can go wrong very quickly. So now let's look at the correct move, queen d5. And here we should continue with our plan, knight f2. And here white has 3 options. So first let's look at c cross b7. And here, well, this is a fork, so we have to sacrifice our bishop here. So bishop cross b7, queen cross b7, but we're going to be gaining a rook for it. So in the end, we've gained a rook for 2 pawns and we've gained a rook and 2 pawns for 2 minor pieces, and also white's king is very exposed. So, you know, depending on the position, it could be good for either side, but in this specific position, it's much better for black. So the game may continue bishop e3, bishop cross e3, king cross e3, and the king is on the 3rd rank with queen still on the board, and no piece is protecting him. This cannot be good for white. So black can simply continue here with castles, and you know, this is going to be very good for black. Let's go back to the second option, which is queen cross e5. This may look like a free pawn, and here we're actually not going to block with the queen, but we're simply going to play king f8. Now, we don't want to trade queens here because our attack will fizzle out, so we have to play king f8. White serves their rook with rook g1, and now we can do this discovered attack, double attack with knight g4. So we're attacking the queen and also the rook. Queen can move to f4, and we don't want to take this rook just yet. First we want to play d cross c6 and have our bishop defend our knight, and the game will continue into a sharp middle game with chances for both sides. So that's the second choice from white, and the third and main choice from white is rook to g1, the very obvious move. Here, once again, we should castle, so this is sort of indirectly defending this pawn, safeguarding our king, and getting our rook into the game. C cross b7 continues the main line. Bishop cross b7, once again, we're sacrificing our bishop like we were in the other line. Queen cross b7 and queen f6. This queen f6 move is very thematic in the Vukovic Gambit. And if you turn the engine on here, even though black is down 2 pieces, the engine actually, well, let's turn on the engine. Yeah, the engine evaluates this as 0.0, so it's completely even here. But it's obviously much nicer to play this position as black, in my opinion. I think many strong players would prefer black in this position. But yeah, the queen f6 move, this is a move you want to remember. It also sets one last trap for white. Here, if white tries to play this move that they've been trying to play all game, bishop e3, the game, it will continue. We can continue with taking this bishop. The king will take the bishop. And now, rook a to b8. And black is completely winning. So this is a skewer on the b pawn. The king is going to be cut off from the second rank, and the king is going to be literally stuck in the middle of the board with nowhere to go. This skewer may not look that bad at first, so it's very easy to overlook, but once this move is played, it's all over for white. The game could continue queen a6, and here you don't want to trade queens, but you simply play rook b6, hitting the queen again, so the queen may want to try to defend this b pawn with queen a3, but here we can simply play rook takes b2, and this rook cannot even be captured because of the fork on d1. So white's king will never be safe for the rest of the game, and black will be the only one having fun here. So those are all the lines that I have. This opening is just great. You will catch so many Ponziani players off guard and have so much fun when you play it. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. If you are convinced it's unsound still, all I have to say to you is just check it with an engine. Engines approve of this gambit, so it may seem crazy because you're giving up a piece in the opening, but this opening is engine approved. So study this video, study part 1, and do your own independent study with the engine. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to subscribe because I'm going to be dropping chess videos every single day, and I don't want you to miss them. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you.